Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we will study friction. Lecture number 20, page 55, unit number 3. Now, the first question is, what is friction? The force that opposes the motion of moving objects is called friction. Friction is the opposing force to the motion of the body. Opposing force to the opposing force to the motion of the body. Of the body. Definition of friction: the opposing force which acts in the opposite direction of the movement of the body of the upper body is called friction. For example, we are pushing this body in this direction. The force of friction will act in the opposite direction. Friction is a force that comes into action as soon as a body is pushed or pulled over a surface. If you are pushing this body or pulling this body, uh, force of friction will come into action. Force of friction is self-adjusting force. Adjusting force. Force of friction is represented by small f, but in your book it is represented by capital F, and written a subscript is written with this, which represents the type of friction. The type of friction. So force of friction is directly proportional to the normal reaction. Normal reaction means weight of the body is also represented by Fn. All these three representations are used for normal reaction. Fs is equal to mu into R. So here we have written Fs, so it will be mu s. General relation is that force of friction is equal to mu into R, where mu is equal to F divided by R, as R is force, normal reaction, or weight of the body, and for F is also frictional force, so it is the ratio between two forces. Ratio between two forces. So it have no unit. Direction of motion of the body. Now, why friction opposes motion? No surface is perfectly smooth. If you take the microscopic picture of this surface and the surface of this body, uh, it will not be perfectly smooth. A surface that appears smooth has pits and bumps. Pits and bumps. Bumps that can be seen under a microscope. Two wooden blocks with their polished surfaces in contact. A magnified view of two smooth surfaces in contact shows the gap and the contacts between them. The contact points between the two surfaces form a sort of cold welds. Cold welds is the contact point. This is cold weld. This is cold weld. So cold weld is the contact point. is the contact point. These cold welds resist the surface from sliding over each other, which results friction. Now types of friction. Limit. First, I will explain the static friction. Static friction is the force of friction when both the bodies are in state of rest. Both the bodies are in state of rest. He is pushing, but this body is in state of rest. So the force of friction between this body and the earth surface, the surface of this body, most probably you push this object on the surface of the earth. So the force of friction between this body and the earth surface is called force of friction when this body is in state of rest. So static friction is represented by Fs. You will write general relation mu into r. Static friction, so write Fs mu is. So if you look to the graph, if you increase the force of friction, the applied force of friction also increases. Here we increase the force, so force of friction also increases. Force of friction increases to this value. So the force of friction during this graph is called static friction. Here the value of static friction is maximum. Here the value of static friction is maximum. I will change the color for static friction. Here the value of static friction is maximum, the green point. This is maximum value, so it is called limiting friction. Here the value is called limiting friction. So the maximum value of static friction is called limiting friction during this graph. This is the maximum value. Now after this, if you increase the applied force, the value decreases, the value of friction decreases, and the body will comes in state of motion. During this graph, the body will be in the state of motion. So kinetic friction is less than limiting friction. So limiting friction is the maximum value of static friction. So you will write Fs, write maximum force of friction, which is static friction, and the maximum value is called limiting friction. Fs maximum and R. The mathematical relation can be written like this. So the maximum friction force that can be developed at the contact surfaces when body is just on the point of moving is called limiting friction. So force of friction, which is maximum value, will be static. Now it is defined as the ratio coefficient of friction. We already defined the ratio between friction and normal force is called coefficient of friction. Now this body is sliding on the earth's surface. So sliding friction is a force that resists the motion of an object moving across a surface. The object is already moving in sliding friction. Simply you can say that force of friction. Sliding friction is a force of friction between two bodies. Between two bodies in which one must be sliding on the surface of another, in which one must be sliding on the surface of another. Another. Now, static and kinetic friction. These are the example of static friction and kinetic friction. Here the body is have at rest position. So force of friction between this body and the earth surface is static friction. Static friction. Here the body is moving with an acceleration a. So the friction, the force of friction is kinetic. Kinetic friction. Applied force is in this direction. Kinetic friction is in this direction. Net force is in this direction because it produces acceleration. Here the net force is 0 because the pushing force and the friction force is equal. Now a model for kinetic friction. This is direction of motion. Body is moving in this direction, so force of friction is in this direction. This is due to the motion of the body. The body force of friction is equal to mu k into F in normal reaction, which represents weight. The force of kinetic friction if with subscript small f between two surfaces equals to the coefficient of kinetic friction and mu k times the normal force. Now rolling friction. The force of friction between the rolling body and the earth surface. The earth surface and the rolling body. The friction that occurs when an object rolls across a surface easier to overcome than sliding friction. Anything with wheels or a ball rolling. If you look here, the point of contact in rolling friction, there is a single point of contact. Single point of contacts. So rolling friction is friction is less than sliding friction. Sliding friction due to single point of contact. Due to a single point of contact. Point of contact. Now braking Braking and skidding. The wheels of a moving vehicle have two velocity components: motion of wheel along the road and rotation of wheel about their axis. If you look, if you see a car, wheel is rotating in circular path and will also vertical motion, a horizontal motion. Motion of wheel along the road. Motion of the wheel along the road. This one. And rotation of wheel. Rotation of wheels. To move a wheel on the road as well as to stop a moving vehicle requires friction between its tires and the road. If you apply brake, its rotational motion is locked up and the wheel starts skidding. If you want to stop a vehicle quickly, a large force of friction between the tires and the road is needed. If you want to stop a car, you need a large force. So, but there is a limit to this force of friction. Force of friction increases to a limit. After that, the further increase in the force of friction stops. If the brakes are applied too strongly, the wheels of the cars will lock up and the car will skid due to its large momentum. If velocity is higher, its circular motion will be locked up. So it will start due to large momentum, it will lose its directional control that may result in an accident. In order to reduce the chances of skidding, it is advisable not to apply brakes too hard that lock up their rolling motion, especially at high speed. Moreover, it is unsafe to drive a vehicle with worn out tires. Vehicle lockup during brake causes skidding, which turn which in turn causes a loss of traction and vehicle control. Traction here means directional control. This reduces the steering ability to change direction, so the car slides out of control. You will lose your control. Advantages and disadvantages of friction. Advantages of friction. Friction is necessary. It enables us to walk without slipping. Without slipping. To enhance friction, it is advisable to use shoe with rough sole while walking on slippery floor. For a similar reason, crutches are provided with rubber tips and their bottom to provide sufficient friction. The brakes and tires of our car and bicycle depend on friction due to function properly. You can read the advantages of friction. The ridges in the skin of our fingers and palms enables us to grasp and hold objects due to friction. You can hold a pen and you can write with pen only because of friction. If there is no friction, you cannot hold the pen in your hand. Similarly, the friction between the nails and screws are held in wood by friction. So read it. This is first, second, third, fourth, and third advantage is read it and memorize it, and take your own example and explain it with the help of your own example. Disadvantages. I will read few. You read all. Despite the fact that friction is very important in our daily life, it also has some disadvantages. The main disadvantage is friction reduce the age of machinery. Machinery will wear and tear up. Due to friction, we have to exert more power. It opposes the motion. Due to friction, noise is also produced in machinery. Due to friction, engines of automobiles consume more fuels. Uh, Take a print of this and memorize. This is the disadvantages of friction. This is the advantages of the friction. Friction reduces the age of machinery, but without friction you cannot walk. You can use lubrication to reduce friction. Friction makes Due to friction there is wear and tear of objects. Lubrication is used to allow the parts to move easily and to prevent wear and tear. Greasing is done in the moving parts of bicycle. Due to friction, the object can be placed at position and shaped. Friction force helps to move the objects. It helps. You cannot walk if there is no friction. With the help of friction, the ridges of skin of our fingers and our palms enable us to grip and hold objects. This one, the energy is lost due to friction. Friction make it more difficult when one has to move the object. It reduces the age of machinery. In the rolling, skating, rolling shoes and smooth surfaces are used to minimize friction. Excess of friction means extra energy. So read it and write it from yourself. Uniform circular motion. Uniform circular motion is the motion of an object. The motion of an object in a circular path is called uniform circular motion. Uniform circular motion is the motion of an object traveling at constant speed on a circular path. If an object is moving in circular path with constant speed, it is called uniform circular motion. If you take this point and the body is moving in this direction, you will draw tangent line on this tangent line. This tangent line will give you the direction of velocity, and if you draw perpendicular to this tangent line, it will give you the direction of centripetal acceleration. Similarly, at this point, if you plot a tangent line, that tangent line will give you the direction of velocity. Perpendicular to that line will give you the direction of acceleration. So in circular path, centripetal, the acceleration which is directed towards the center of the circle, if you see at every point, acceleration will be directed towards the center of the circle. So the acceleration which is directed towards the center of the circle is called centripetal acceleration, and it is equal to v square divided by r. Acceleration directed towards the center of the circle, directed towards the center of the circle. So centripetal acceleration is equal to, if I will erase, then I will write again, force is equal to ma. If you write centripetal force, you will write centripetal acceleration. So Fc is equal to m, centripetal acceleration, write the value of centripetal acceleration, which is equal to v square divided by r. Now the force which tends to move the body in a circular path is called centripetal force. If a body is moving in a straight line, and you exert a force in this direction, and this force compels the body to move in a circular path, this force is called centripetal force, and the reaction force to the centripetal force is called centrifugal force. Definition of uniform circular motion. Uniform circular motion is the motion of an object traveling at constant speed on a circular track. Circular motion. This force is called centripetal force because it pushes the body towards the center of the circle. For uniform circular motion, body needs a lateral force such that it continuously changes its direction. This force is called centripetal force. The force which pushing the body towards center of the circle is called centripetal force, and compel the body to move in a circular path is called centripetal force. Centripetal force is defined as the radial force directly towards the center acting on a body in circular motion. Centripetal acceleration. Acceleration produced by centripetal force is called centripetal acceleration. It is always directed towards, at every point it is directed towards the center of the circle. Centripetal acceleration is the rate of change of velocity of an object that is associated with the change in direction of the velocity. Centripetal acceleration is always perpendicular to the velocity. In a circle, if this is the direction of velocity, this will be the direction of acceleration. Here the acceleration is this. Angle must always be 90 between the direction of velocity and direction of acceleration. This line is plotted here straight. This line is in this direction for velocity, and this will be the change in velocity. This is the numerical value formula for centripetal acceleration. This is for centripetal force. Centrifugal force. The reaction force to the centripetal force is called centrifugal force. The reaction force to the centripetal force. To the centripetal force. For example, F centrifugal is equal to minus F centripetal. F centrifugal is equal to minus mv square divided by r. It is the reaction force to the centripetal force. Thank you students. Revise it. Wish you best of luck. Allah Hafiz.